Hey, Mr. Vickery here. We're going to talk about titrations of acids and bases. Step one of your procedure, you're going to measure out about 100 milliliters or so. I would say 125 milliliters of sodium hydroxide, and it says 0.1 molar on the bottle. You want enough to complete all the trials. You can go back to the stock bottle, but this will get you through at least the standardization of sodium hydroxide. Step 2 of your lab procedure says that you need between 0.4 and 0.6 grams of KHP put into 2 separate Erlenmeyer flasks. In order to do this, we have to first zero out a weight boat, so we're going to hit 0. And a lot of times you're worried about exact amounts. We just need to get it between 0.4 and 0.6. So I'm going to show you a technique where we're going to grab some solid KHP on the end of our lab scoop. And if I hold it perpendicular or flat like this, and I tap it with my finger, I can control the amount of KHP that I'm adding to the weight boat. And if you look, maybe you can see that we're at about 0.423. Again, we want it between 0.4 and 0.6. So I'm just going to get right in the middle there, 0.515. Now, that number is not what we're going to go with for the final count. We're more concerned with how much of this gets into this. So what we have to do is set that to the side, zero our balance, and take the mass of this Erlenmeyer flask. Record that number, 102.397. Now when I add the KHP, and with these weight boats, if you fold them kind of like a funnel, you can funnel that right into your Erlenmeyer flask. Don't worry if you didn't get every single grain, because now we know exactly how much went into the flask, and when we remass, the mass has gone up to 102.903, and now through subtraction we know exactly how much KHP has made it into the flask. Now that we've got the KHP in our flask, we need to add about 100 milliliters of water. This doesn't have to be exact, so we can actually use the graduations right here on the flask. The reason this doesn't have to be exact is because the amount of acid that's in there remains constant. So we already know there's a certain number of moles of KHP. So we're going to get about 100 milliliters of water. So again, I'm going to qualitatively measure that using the line on the Erlenmeyer flask. And you can see, if you zoom in close here, you can see that there's still some KHP that has not yet dissolved. If you just gently swirl until that's all dissolved, then you'll be ready. The last step to prepare our KHP sample is, this is very important. If you do not add the phenolphthalein, you will not get a color change. That is a common mistake. You will need at least 2 drops. I'll put in 3 for safekeeping. And continue to swirl until that is all dissolved. Now we are going to set up our burette and clamp on the ring stand. We're actually going to show you how this works as far as the rinse.
Abby Cook, your right is waiting out front. Abby Cook, your right is waiting out front.
So you attach the clamp to the ring stand. The burette will attach like so, nice and secure. But before we put that on and fill it up, we have to rinse it. We don't know what was in the burette before. Could be dust, could be water, could be lots of things. So in order to rinse this, if we look at the valve, perpendicular means closed, parallel means open, so we want it closed. And And we're going to put a small amount of sodium hydroxide, and it suggests about 5 milliliters. Just going to estimate. I put in a little more than 5. We need to rinse the burette in the sodium hydroxide. So if you notice, I'm very slowly letting the sodium hydroxide get close to the top, and I'm rotating the burette at the same time. So what I'm trying to do is rinse the sides of this burette without dumping it out the end. When I feel like I've sufficiently rinsed, have a waste container, and we're going to run into some problems here. And ideally, you want to rinse your sodium hydroxide through the burette, but this one seems to be clogged, so we're going to take that apart quick and rinse it out. So when you turn the valve parallel, your sodium hydroxide should come out. And in this case, it is, but it's moving very slow. And you'll find that the reason for that is that you don't have enough stuff in the container. So it's really just run by pressure. So once you get to a certain level, it will not come out any longer. But now we're ensuring that the tip is being rinsed. Once we've put a few milliliters through the tip, we'll turn that valve off and dump the excess out. You're going to want to do 2 rinses with the sodium hydroxide. Make sure when you're adding the sodium hydroxide that you have the valve closed. Can't say that enough. It'll go all over the floor. So give it that second rinse. And into the waste container. Put the burette on the clamp. Carefully fill the burette all the way to the 0 mark. If you go above, that's okay. It's filled. We want to make sure there's no air in this part of the burette here. To ensure that that's the case, put your waste container, open the valve, and make sure that the liquid is flowing smoothly. We want the level below the 0. So once it is, you're ready to start your first titration.